Yeah. How do you think about setting milestones, Chandler?
As fast as humanly possible. I don't know. I'm sure Turner has some impact of this, but there's Elon time always, and that's a hard one to battle with usually. I think I definitely say I lean towards that in setting these very
I can attest
milestones.
Knowing you pretty well by now.
Yeah. I really try to think about it from, fortunately, I've been able to touch a lot of different parts of rockets over my short but jam-packed career so far. and I have a decent gauge on how long things should take. And I think sort of to the effect of this drumbeat thing, but doing something sort of upfront to align the team to like, hey, this is how long I think these things are going to take. You as the person who's going to go execute on it directly, like, does this sound reasonable? And then battle it there early, and then set that schedule from the get-go, which is what we did. We all sat down and we set this very ambitious schedule to go get a rocket in the air by June, and like we broke down the things we need to do to get there, and they're very reasonable. And if we start straying from that path, then you start to be like, what's wrong?
I mean, I guess this is where having quite technical folks in leadership really matters.
Yeah, you have to have
you're credible.
You have to have like a core. You have to have a sense of like what is actually challenging but achievable.
Yeah.
And like the purpose of setting super aggressive milestones, which I think everyone should do, is it's meant to weed out like what the actual critical paths are. Going back to the critical path comment of like, instead of saying, okay, I've done this before, it should take 36 months. Like when Elon sets like super aggressive targets, the goal is actually to get the team to think really deliberately and very
about what doesn't matter,
about what doesn't work in that like what actually doesn't solve for that aggressive time frame. And then it gives you your priority list. It's like, okay, there's 1,000 things that have to happen. If we want to do it in 6 months, 900 of those things can be done in 6 months, but 100 of them cannot be done in 6 months, and so we have to go attack those 100 things. It's like
attack can mean delete them too.
Exactly.
And like float those things to the top and then cut them.
That's right.
Yeah.
Both Tesla and SpaceX are famous for, all-nighters, like a very intense work culture, long working hours, like these really hard deadlines where, you're trying to do something in 6 months, which normally might take 36 months. How do you avoid kind of team burnout in those situations?
A lot of this comes back to how mission aligned the company is, or how strong the mission of the company is. It doesn't feel like working if it's fun, and particularly for folks who are so aligned with the mission of the company. Obviously, in SpaceX's case, making life multiplanetary, that's a fantastic mission to go stand behind and work your butt off to achieve. So it makes the long hours, the overnight, the all-nighters, it makes it so that they don't really impact you that much. And I think a very high amount of thought on my end right now is going into, how do I really convince a lot of folks who haven't thought about defense before to be passionate about defense? Because the reality is in my case, there's so much talent that's living at SpaceX. There's so much talent living at Rocket Lab, Firefly, and Relativity that need to come work this problem set too. It's how do you build that same fiery mission alignment that SpaceX has been able to achieve and other companies have been able to achieve with their workforce now in these new American dynamism focused problem sets that people just haven't been working on in a while, and then makes it all feel like fun and not like pain.
Yeah, the mission alignment is definitely kind of like the core piece. I think the thing that actually causes burnout is churn, and like a lack of feeling like you're making progress towards a goal. And so if people are working towards something and they feel like they're actually like progressing towards it, and if you're mission aligned, solving hard problems can be fun because as long as you are like making progress towards that goal. And so there's a handful of things that can make like work not fun, which is churn can come from like, erratic decision making that kind of like moves teams in different directions. And there's always going to be a little bit of that, especially in startup companies that are moving quick and are being very nimble. But the second is like politics in companies creates an insane amount of churn. Data silos and kind of hoarding your Legos is what we call it, can create an insane amount of churn. And when people have to deal with that and aren't able to focus on like, okay, I have a problem that I have to solve, the pathway is clear, the decision is clear, the priorities are clear, they'll work their butts off to go do it. But it definitely, it destroys kind of like the excitement. If you have things that are around the team that are taking away from like the core mission. So people can get excited about like impossible goals because it's we're going to go prove it.
It's
like
can be done. The only thing that people do really get excited about if it feels impossible.
But that's the other thing that Chandler mentioned, which is like as long as you're setting goals that are aggressive but are possible, like that has to be like it has to be in the realm of possibility.
Within reach.
Then it doesn't, like if you go super aggressive on targets that have no actual technical path towards achieving it, that can be demoralizing also.
Yeah.
So it's a mix of like making sure that churn is gone to the extent that you can, and making sure that you're setting goals that are motivating, not demoralizing.
Yeah. So maybe flipping it, what principle from Tesla or SpaceX has not worked for you in your new companies, or patterns that you maybe needed to unlearn? It didn't apply either because of the domain or because of the size of the company or something else.
I think a fun one it's not choosing not to do it. It's kind of delaying the implementation of. But the one thing that I definitely employed working Starship, a little bit on Dragon as well, is with the fantastic resource that SpaceX has behind it, you can do a lot of fantastic things. And in order to fight critical path, there are ways to do that maybe are less efficient, I suppose, but ways that will go achieve the goal. Parallel pathing a lot of things can be pretty resource intensive, both on a time space, but also on cost. And I think that's one thing that we are not able to do right now, given our size. But I think it's something that as we grow, like in order to hit speed, you need to do everything possible. And what possible looks like right now for us is growing very quickly, but is a different set of possibilities than maybe what SpaceX has right now. So I think kind of really keeping an eye on when that point is, so that we can crank up the velocity even more, has been in my mind.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually say that there's any like one pinpointed thing that at least at Tesla at Tesla was a core principle that we wouldn't mimic. I would say that it's more like kind of massaging the implementation of those. That is to address some of the things like churn and turnover and burnout.
Well, I mean, at Tesla, you were there as the company grew an order of magnitude. So you saw two very different versions of the company. So I imagine, some lessons from when Tesla, crossed 100,000 people are less relevant to you.
In the early days, it was flatter, obviously, as you would expect, because once you get to like 130, 140,000 people, you have to start to layer in some structure.
I mean, you have massive, groups of people who are working on factory floors who are less involved in design decisions.
Yeah, and so those organizations stayed flat and nimble, and still are to this day. But I don't think there's any, because I actually believe in a lot of in most of kind of how Tesla was running. I think that it's just there's little tweaks that you can make along the way that enable you to make it more sustainable for the teams.
So maybe switching gears a little bit, both Tesla and SpaceX are famous for approaching every problem with this kind of factory mindset. Everything is a factory. Everything, you touched on it earlier, Turner, everything kind of boils down to a manufacturing problem. So I want to talk a little bit about what that means in practice. Chandler, maybe starting with you, can we talk about iteration on Starship? So from V1 to V2 to V3, how did you balance system complexity and production rate?
Yeah. Just to give some context, whenever I started in the Starship program, it was around Flight 3 timeframe. So a little bit of V1 play in terms of full stack, and then pushed all the way through the V2 development cycle, and then started to touch V3 and kind of lay that out before I left the company. I think really what this trade for us came down to is and what enabled kind of the speed and thinking with this factory mindset is, and really just production focus in general, is requirements. From the design side, if you can boil up all of the requirements that sound stupid as fast as possible, and then give yourself a chance to whack them out of the equation, you now leave yourself.
Like what? Give me an example, if you can.
Yeah, there's one that's kind of interesting. It's kind of getting into the weeds, but we had the opportunity to pull some hardware from Booster. So Booster was a little bit ahead of the ship team in terms of their V3 design. They kind of skipped V2 for Booster. They went from V1 to V3. And they had some hardware designed for the V3 vehicle that actually could have been plugged in the ship very easily. And we had very limited engineers to go design a ton of prop systems hardware. And we identified that, we could maybe use this. And we kind of brought it over early, which would have been an earlier implementation than Booster. And one of the things that popped up that sounds kind of silly is it was essentially a snorkel that lives inside the fuel tank, and you could condense liquid inside that snorkel. And the valves that were effectively venting the tank there don't like liquid. So when we were like trying to go super fast, like, oh, sweet, we got free hardware. We can skip a whole design cycle. Let's go fast so we can, just jump into production sooner rather than later. We were like, oh, we're going to get liquid in this thing too. I don't know if the valves are going to like that. And what we did is we just spooled up the necessary resources to go prove that that's going to be okay. And what that did was not only allow us to go roll in this whole hardware design into production sooner, but it also enabled Booster once they got there to go use the same hardware. So from a company goal perspective, it was fantastic. And it was like the perfect direction. I think I won't take credit for all of that ideation. Actually, another guy on the team is still there, kind of brought it to my plate, and I'm like, oh man, that's freaking great. Let's do it. Let's go fast. But that's one thing, and it's really just, staying super clear on this intention to question every requirement, because what that does is it enables your requirements set whenever an engineer steps in to go actually design the hardware to be enabled to design a very simple solution. And simple is fast, simple is cheap. So really, I think that whole part of the SpaceX mantra is very real, and it is happening across Starship. It's even happening on fixes on Dragon and Falcon.
Like if you hadn't been focused, if you hadn't been thinking of 2 steps ahead about production, you would have just designed something from scratch that was perfectly bespoke to the set of requirements.
Exactly. It's like exactly. Bespoke requirements. And I think, we literally had a whole design for all this hardware before realizing, oh crap, we should just go use that. Because then we can go start figuring out how to build these, somewhat complex weldments sooner rather than later, and then build the production of those very quickly.
That's where